Hello and welcome to the Doctor Who Guide. I am your host, Alex Patterson, and today I am very, very excited to be interviewing an incredible Doctor Who fan, artist, writer, Smuzz. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I am so excited to have you here. The reason that we are talking today is because our connection, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but our connection, we both contributed to the 1997 unofficial Doctor Who annual from Terraqueous Distributors. It's come out today, or at the time that you were watching this, it's come out, and it's available to order. And so we're both very excited about it. There's definitely so much to talk about, and we will cover just a little bit of our contributions to the annual, but you are going to have to buy it if you want to, for instance, read my short story in it called The Edge of Oblivion and to see the amazing illustrations, contributions by Smuzz. So please let us know what your contributions were to the annual and give us a little introduction.
I heard of the Terraqueous thing. It's a long while back. I didn't get to contribute to the first one, which was the missing 72 annual, I think. Um, I think it got lost in the post somewhere. Me saying that sounds like fun. So I did the first thing I did was the master one. That's it. I don't have that one. Yeah, that looks great. I love the cover, and that
Doesn't
brings
it?
back memory. Well, the good thing is it brings back memories of being a teenager and and being really keen to get hold of the Doctor Who annual, which would be advertised in the summer in catalogues. And in those days, they wouldn't have had the inside; they just decided on the cover, and you just obsess about the cover for months until eventually you got it at Christmas, and then it was all those strange stories which aren't quite like Doctor Who. So anyway, no, I didn't do that. So I did the master one, which was um, tremendous fun because I really don't think the master is a good idea. I don't like the master. I wasn't keen on the master when it came out, but it could be the master. And so, writing for Delgado, you look at it and think, well, what could it be? And you realize that Delgado is brilliant and he's having the time of his life. And as far as I was concerned, the job was to work out why the master should be brilliant and how it never quite happens. So I found excuses for what the master does, and that was three stories, three completely different stories, but which muck around with the master is better than you realize, you know. And that was terrific, and got to do the illustrations for two of them, and then one of them was illustrated by Paul Cook, who I never heard of, um, which is wonderful. He did it. He did those illustrations in the style of the first Doctor Who annual, um, with Walter Howarth, uh, and they're nothing like I would have done. They're brilliant. I hadn't thought of doing them those ways, and they work really well. So that was terrifically good fun. And there was the oh no, the first thing I did was a Colin Baker one. I did illustrations for that. That's when I said, "Shall I be doing artwork?" Mark said, "Please," and so no, I said, "Should I be doing stories?" Mark said, "Please." So I did illustrations for those end pieces, contents pages, story illustrations. The one before that, there are two of those.
Okay.
There's one before where again I really wanted with the end pages. You really want them to say you really want to go on this journey. There's this magic blue box. You open it up. It's rather like Narnia, and outside there's great scenery. And you always want to sort of take the reader in those two pages and say, look at the really cool places you can go. And so that's the joy of the inside end pieces is just to say, wow, you don't need a story, but you hopefully put things in there where I've done a kids book, and that's the kind of thing you do is you put pictures in where you invite the child or adult to say, if you go there, that happens, and that could be there, and I could, and that's the fun thing with those kinds of pictures. Um, then I've done the other stories. Yeah, Colin Baker stories. That was a Dracula one. I think that was the Dracula one. I think I just did one, and there were two again end pieces and so forth. And two stories for Sylvester McCoy, which was really strange because one of them was Ace. There's a lot to do with Ace. One of them was Mel. And with all due respect to, well, the actress, really, there's not a lot in Mel. And so that's fascinating, finding what you can do with Mel. And you can. You can do great things with Mel. It's just the writers never quite bothered. It must have been so frustrating being Bonnie Langford thinking, I've got an acting part. I'm not just singing and dancing, and then just being forced to do this nonsense and having to do it in a small studio with a camera at that distance. And I'm sure that underneath it all, she sort of, I think she's probably much happier with Big Finish. Most people are. So anyway, so we've done those. And then there's the Paul McGann one, which is strange because, of course, there was only one Paul McGann story, as we all know. And so it ends up by borrowing on, and I'm more vague about this, it's borrowed on more one of the spin-offery things that have happened with Paul McGann, because either you say there was only one story, or you might say, as Russell T Davies said, there isn't a Paul McGann story. I think he's changed his mind on that one. And or you say, well, actually, all those stories kind of happened. And so the annual, as the other two would have said, well, what everybody else would have said, is taking those things, which I know very little about. So you've got this backstory of an ice warrior and a girl and the Eighth Doctor, and so I've got very strong feelings about ice warriors. I'm really obsessed with ice warriors. So I didn't write about the ice warrior because I couldn't have done that. I just concentrated on the Doctor. And Mark had got this rather lovely idea of making the story shorter because I'd ended up writing stories sometimes which you think this is a novel. You crush it, which is important. And this was the challenge of well, a couple of times. And this was the challenge of doing something which is really short. So I wrote a very short story, whereupon Mark said, more! So it's a bit longer. And that's really an opportunity to ask a lot more questions about the nature of the Doctor and what he does, but mainly to, am I allowed to say that one? Sort of play with a bit of classic Who, which I absolutely adore, and do terrible things to it because I care. Is
Wow.
that mysterious enough, or would you like more details?
That's honestly incredible. I mean, part of the balance that we have to strike with these interviews is not giving away so much that we ruin the intrigue around the annual, but we do need to tell people some about it in order to pitch it. So I think you're striking a great balance there. And of course, what's wonderful about this annual is that chance to celebrate Paul McGann, his Eighth Doctor, and as you're saying, take the character and really, back in the day, it was an interesting step not having Doctor Who on TV because Doctor Who magazine, the comics, the novels, they didn't have to, you know, write in a way that, you know, when the TV show was on air, they had to keep the continuity in line and the character growth in line with what was on TV. And
Oh no,
so
they did.
well,
Famously,
every
as a Doctor
famously,
Who fan then, or sometimes not a Doctor Who fan then, you used to just bang your head against the door when they just forgot whole lots of things. And, no, there was very much a view that this is a program that all the family love, and they'll watch it, but we can't possibly expect them to remember anything about it from apart from last week. And it's amazing, isn't it, how you were expected to remember a story for the previous sort of 6 weeks for this next 25 minutes. And people generally, well, we did, the fans did, and you knew what was happening. And later on, you thought, I bet if you put them all together, they wouldn't make sense. And it's very odd how now we view them as a as a collection, as all those episodes together. And they do make sense, and they refer to previous episodes, and there are jokes that develop and characters that, and it's a lot. It really is uncanny the work they put into it, but they didn't expect the audience to know much about the history of Who. So, I mean, if they mentioned a Dalek, as I mean, I remember when there's a point where the Doctor says, "Dead as a Dalek in Face of Evil," episode one, and all us fans went, "Oh, they remember the Daleks exist," which is pretty low bar. But it's like, well, they mentioned the Daleks not in a Dalek story, so that was odd. Yeah, so Paul McGann was different, and basically, it's what happens if the Americans get their hands on Doctor Who and want to make it like that. And I'm so glad he didn't carry on. It could have been such a bad idea. It was very much a sort of Batman story or something. But they had a person who could definitely do the Doctor in the middle of it, and so that was exciting. But you thought, no, please don't do any more because you're making it into an American type story. I don't know if does it look American to you?
It, well, it looks like Americans trying to do a British thing to me. So it's
Yeah,
not entirely like, oh, this is very familiarly American, but it it is very much its own kind of thing. And the thing that with the Eighth Doctor is because you didn't have the TV series never went forward, unfortunately. And say what you will about the TV movie, I think the casting of Paul McGann was a stroke of genius, and so it is a shame that it never got. In a way, it's a shame it never got picked up. In another sense, that might have stopped the new series from ever happening. So, we look back on it with hindsight and everything, but with the novels and comics, they kind of had this added freedom to create their own continuity and build on their own stories. And so it's been very interesting to see the different kind of directions. And if you ever try and put all of the stories together into one continuity for the Eighth Doctor, it gets quite complex very quickly, and they're written in bouts of amnesia. So, from a continuity standpoint, it is very interesting that in some cases they were very self-referential, and you had to have seen a lot or read a lot in order to understand the plot. And in some cases, it was so standalone it could have been almost unrecognizable. So it I also do think the TV movie had wonderful music as well. I just recently had watched it, and so it's now what, 20 over 25 years? It must be, because I'm
oh
25
God,
and
yeah,
I was born in 97. So
yeah.
it's interesting the ways in which it stands the test of time and doesn't stand the test of time. But you had talked about the Master Annual. I don't unfortunately have that
Oh,
to hand or at all. It's expensive on eBay now, but it looks
oh,
absolutely incredible. You
it's
mentioned
brilliant.
not
It's the
uh,
lovely thing with the Master Annual is, thank God Mark had rules. I think rules are really important. For a start, if you've got rules, you can write to them, and that allows you something to bounce off. And so he was very keen to say to people, there is no doctor in this. It's the Master's Annual. He's the hero. And that was so important. I think a lot of writers wanted to bring the doctors in, or doctor, one of them, in. And and that would have been such a bad idea. So seeing what he's doing and seeing it from his viewpoint, and the fact that the annual, the cover by Paul Cook is just a homage to the William Hartnell first annual, the seminal first annual that ever existed, and it's great seeing it turned inside out. And I was thrilled to make him absolutely the coolest guy ever. Obviously, far worse than he's portrayed in the TV, because you can do that, but charming,
I
so
mean,
charismatic and fascinating, and such a complete bastard.
the role of the Master is very interesting, because there is kind of a more similarities, especially if you look at the classic series masters, in that kind of suave, debonair style. He always seems, very, even if he's not comfortable on the inside, just putting on these airs of being in control, knowing what's going on. I remember reading about, I believe it was Barry Letts talking about how they may have overdone the master in the first season by having him in every episode, because the audience started to guess that he'd be in the next story and start to look for him, and even if he was in disguise, or had his name anagrammed in the credits, they still need to look out for him. Did you find the switch of writing for him uh uh challenging? Or because I think most villains, when written the best, are absolutely convinced that they're the heroes of their own stories, and
Mm,
they might
yeah.
know that they're doing, their ends might justify the means more. They're doing certain things in a way that other people wouldn't think is worth it, but they are convinced that they're doing the right thing. So was that like an interesting challenge to have to write just for the master in that way?
It wasn't a challenge, it was just a gift. Because you're right, he's the hero. He's absolutely the hero. Why else would you do anything? And the thing, as I said, what I as a kid, I did not like the Master because, as you say, in the first season he was in every damn story, and the reason was because they realised. I mean, Malcolm Hulke had said, "We've only got two stories: they come to us, or we go to them." Or mad scientist, and they were sort of stuck with mad scientist all the time. So we keep going to a research base, and there's a loony in charge, and the master, as I understand it, was well, we need an explanation. Who is this loony? And thought we could have a person who's deliberately a loony, and so they came up with this ridiculous Moriarty thing. And as you know, Sherlock Holmes doesn't have a Moriarty. There is a Moriarty, and he turns up once, and we don't see him then. We just read a letter about Holmes has met him, apparently, allegedly. But the point about Moriarty, he is not there. So you can always fantasize that behind certain stories there might be this guy, and he's mentioned in a couple of stories as probably behind it. But he's not twirling moustaches and engaging in fights with Holmes because he's cleverer than that. I mean, the bloke who Holmes falls down the Reichenbach Falls with, if that's what happened, allegedly. I mean, we don't know. Still, it's still hearsay. Might have been any actor. I mean, why would that have been Moriarty, really? And the idea that the Master would be a character that was never really written that way by Conan Doyle anyway seemed kind of insulting to the Master. So for me, that was the point: is why the hell does he act as such an idiot and keep losing when he's clearly pretty bright? In fact, we know he got higher marks than the Doctor, certainly. And I'm prepared to believe he is better than the Doctor in lots of ways, but terribly unlucky. So there had to be an excuse, really, or a reason why he behaves in that way. And that's more interesting than, oh, he's a buffoon who turns up and fails and goes, curses. I mean, that's if that's your worst enemy, then you're an idiot, because that's the kind of enemy you've got. And the Doctor's not. Well, the Doctor's got weaknesses, but he's not an idiot. So yeah, that was a joy. So it was an opportunity for each story to take why he does something, give a sort of reason, and give him a good reason, and see how well he does it, how very, very good he is, and generally to win. Because why would you lose? And one of the stories did have a thing where there's a bit where it summarizes basically the first season we see him, because there was a chocolate bar once upon a time in England, well, of course, well, in Scotland too, for God's sake, Wales and possibly Ireland, a Doctor Who chocolate bar. And on the back, there was let's collect the wrappers, and they formed a story called Doctor Who and Master Plan Q, which was this brilliant plan the Master had got involving a sort of radioactive alien dinosaur and a nuclear power station, I think. I mean, fill in the gaps. It's that. It's ridiculous. And so there is this non-story, which isn't canon. It's just a chocolate bar. And yes, I collected all of them. And yes, I've still got them because they weren't stolen. And they are ridiculous. And so that gave me the excuse to have at one point, and it's just a little detail to one side of the story, where he has this index of experiments and plans for all these preposterous plans, which go all the way to Q. And if in the middle of them there are a bunch of plans which are plainly insane, which he's rejected unless he gets bored. And they're season one. Well, they're the Masters season one, but that's not the story. The story is much more. That story is much more about how the Master is. It's very cool. So yeah, it's a delight. And again, there's the lovely thing that if you write a character, um, which exists, you get to know them. And I really got to, from there on, I've enjoyed seeing Master stories a lot more because I think I can now look at Roger Delgado and go, yeah, I know what you're doing. You're doing it very well. What a pity the scriptwriters didn't give you more to play with rather than just being constantly beaten by the Doctor. I think he needed to win more often,
I think so.
which doesn't necessarily mean in destroying the Earth. That probably isn't the point. Sorry.
Right, absolutely. I mean, certain that's kind of the beauty of these annuals and like you say, whether it's it's no secret that the a lot of either Doctor Who companions or doctors, they were always trying to work with the scripts to give their characters something more that either
Yeah.
felt more authentic to them or felt more fleshed out. And certain people, would have stayed on the show longer if their characters had been given, more breathing space. Like Susan's character was supposed to, be this real sort of action adventure hero or Avengers type character and have these telepathic abilities and that's what was pitched. And we didn't get that to the full fruition. Um, the with the Master's character, how I wish we'd have gotten that final confrontation with the Third Doctor and the Master. Wouldn't that have been
No,
amazing?
that would have been melodramatic nonsense. No, you're right. I think it's hard to think of any companions from the classic series who were treated with the kind of stories they really could have done with. I mean, the thing that appeals to me, well, jumps out mostly is Leela, who Louise Jameson has been given a really intelligent couple of scripts by Chris Boucher with The Face of Evil and Robots of Death. Please, the rest of the writers, follow this. Leela is probably one of the most intelligent companions going. And she's probably in love with the Doctor. And that's obviously impossible in so many ways. And she's got a lot of issues to deal with. And she's fascinating. And very quickly, she just becomes this dumb puppy thing. And Louise Jameson plainly wants to explore more of Leela. And at the end, there's just the point when she's written out because of all the contractual things you remember. And her and the guy playing Android have got to pretend there's a reason for her to marry him and so vice versa. And there's nothing in the script. There's just, we better sort of hold hands and try and look at each other while in between Sontaran fighting. And it's just, your heart goes out to, because Louise Jameson is, of course, a superb actress.
That's
I mean, have you seen her in Temper?
no,
Uh,
no, I haven't.
well, it's a British drama series which was on again BBC One, I think, about women in a Japanese prisoner of war camp during World War II. So women acting, very few roles for blokes. There's a few roles for some Japanese actors, and they get some decent roles. But really, it's a woman's show in the 80s. And yeah, all the women are great. Otherwise, they wouldn't be there. And Louise Jameson's in it. She's not glamorous. Well, she is because she's Louise Jameson, but she isn't really very glamorous. And you can watch her acting, and that's a relief. Um, so yeah, and any companion has been until the new series when suddenly they got things to do, they got lives, and you got all sorts of post Buffy kind of sophistication. But before that, it's just like watching actors being slapped in the face with nonsense for most of. As a Doctor Who fan, it's embarrassing. There are occasionally times when that you can see them rejoicing and being allowed to do something, but mostly it's that bunch of classic. There are. I don't know about in America. Have you seen many pastiches of America of Doctor Who in America? Because it's been a tradition in England to have, if there's a comedy show with sketches, we'll do a Doctor Who sketch. And it's not hard if they write themselves, the dumb companion, the pompous doctor, the stupid, rubbish-looking monster in a corridor, and it's easy. And that must be what appealed in the mind of so many people who've been companions over the years. And yeah, Susan being one, or Maureen O'Brien, who Vicky, um, who had a career of as a Shakespearean actress, maybe still has one. I'm sorry, I'm not well enough informed. She's stunning again. And look at what Vicky gets to do. She does what she does really well, but there's not much there for her to do, really. She does it superbly, the same as, I mean, amazingly enough, Peter Purvis has a good chemistry with her, but it's the actors working more than the writers, or or Jamie and Victoria, and all that stuff. Sorry.
Oh, it's there are so many moments, and I think that as a Doctor Who fan, we it can almost be surreal when you do you ever experience when you watch a show with somebody else how it shifts kind of how you're viewing it, and so I find that for me I've developed these entire personas that not even based on the extended universe and all that they've built on these characters, but just by watching Doctor Who and seeing these actors, you develop these characters to the point where what they say and do on screen is much less complex than they really are to you. And so when you watch it with somebody for the first time, it can be interesting to see their reactions, and you go, well, you just need to watch more and see it. So I think it's kudos to the actors and to what writers were able to give them some meat to get into, because there are some episodes where they've got nothing to do.
Yeah, well, that's the difference between good writers and. And so you've got again Chris Boucher, who knew Leela, made Leela, and Leela is stunning. I mean, such a great character. Or Robert Holmes. I mean, I'm kind of old Who and so forth, but there's no two ways about it. When Russell T comes along, he makes them people. I mean, we there's nothing very wonderful about Rose. She's a chav. She really is a really ordinary girl, and she becomes exciting. She becomes an extraordinary girl. She is. It's that great. It's the Henry Higgins, Eliza Doolittle thing going on, and I love the way that's symbolised by she gradually changes clothes, which the other ones had always done, but it wasn't really deliberate. And so she changes from being sort of chavvy to being like a girl who's gone to university. And that's obviously what Russell T Davies is saying is she's kind of getting educated, and she might just as well be doing a course somewhere because that's what is happening to her. And it's beautiful to watch. Somebody's taken the trouble, and in between that, you get terrible things. Yeah. So sorry, I lost my thread. There was something about
Oh,
the
you're good.
Doctor as well.
The the thing that I found, like you're saying, just such a gift to be able to work with these characters in the 97 annual of
That's what.
Stacey and Sard. Yeah,
Can I
go
just
for it.
say, watching Doctor Who that I've always, well, since I was, I don't know, teenager, there's lots of ways of watching it. You watch it for the adventure, and you watch it for the science fiction, and oh, that's borrowed, that nicked that, that's wrong, science is rubbish, etc. Then there's the, oh, look how clever they've been in the studio. And then there's the, oh, I can see what the writer's done here, and oh, they've taken a day off, and oh, they've done that thing there, and oh, I can see they've cut and pasted that there. That's a bunch. And then there's the, suppose it's real, which is by and large, I think, certainly the way I've watched a lot of Doctor Who's. I don't know if it's probably common for most of us, where you look at it and go, okay, so for Ark in Space, you go, okay, that's basically what the sort of revivification center looks like here, but I know it's better than that. It's bigger. It's a much more convincing set. When you watch Alien, you go, yeah, more like that. Except no, it wasn't. It was very filthy in Alien, of course. Nova Beacon, the Ark is just so much cleaner. It's sterile, isn't it? Um, so there are lots of ways of watching it, but there was a point when I had an estranged son, and he'd been brought up very much without Doctor Who due to some plot, and so I got to hang out with him and that, and have fun. And yes, I was going to show him Doctor Who. And which Doctor Who am I going to show him? Well, the best one ever at that point, which is definitely Robots of Death. And so he watched episode 1 of Robots of Death like a good kid who, we've been out biking, we climbed trees, and we'd done all sorts of cool things. And now he had to pay for it. He had a bath, we'd had cocoa. I've got to be polite now. And so he sat very politely until the doctor nearly gets covered in gravel. And then looks around and says, so this doctor bloke, is he good at fighting or what? I thought, oh, I hadn't seen that program. I've got to watch that program again. The guy who should be fighting, and we're waiting for him to fight. So your mind goes back to the point when he's offering jelly babies to the crew, and it's the crew are so wonderfully effete. It's gorgeous, and everybody's on edge. And there's a point where he offers a jelly baby, and the guy would ultimately go off to play Travis for Lake Seven, Brian Croucher. Superb acting. He's just on the edge, absolutely neurotic, but very manly, very tough. So he just snaps and just knocks the jelly babies out the doctor's hand as if it's some sort of weapon. And that shows how in control the doctor is and how totally nervous wreck everybody is, particularly him. That's gorgeous. And my son at that point would be saying, is he going to hit him now? Of course, for us, it's like, well, no, this is the hero who doesn't do that. That's why he's my hero. He's the pacifist guy who thinks things. Oh, he should be hitting people. You're right. It's weird.